Welcome to the Proceedings podcast. I'm Bill Hamblet, the editor-in-chief of Proceedings, and my normal co-host, Ward Carroll, is not with me today, so this is the first time I've done a podcast alone and unafraid, and I'm looking forward to this. We got a great guest coming up. First, just a couple things to highlight things that are happening here at the Naval Institute. We finished the April issue of the magazine of Proceedings last week, so it's off to the printers to reach your mailbox by the 1st of April. So April is our expeditionary warfare issue. So we've got some great articles. The Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps. We got an article by the head of the Navy SEALs, Naval Special Warfare, Admiral H.W. Howard. Great piece on what's happening with Naval Special Warfare as they look to get back to their focus as being naval commandos. So that's a great article. Lots of other just terrific stuff about expeditionary warfare where, land meets sea. Things that the Navy, the Marine Corps, and Naval Special Warfare are doing together. Also want to highlight in that issue, in our CEO notes, there's mention of the annual meeting at the Naval Institute. So once a year, it's always in May, we do our annual meeting. This is the first time we're ever going to have it here. I shouldn't say first time we're ever going to have it at the Naval Institute, but it's the first time that I can remember that we're having the annual meeting here at the Naval Institute in Annapolis on the Naval Academy grounds in the Jack C. Taylor Conference Center. So we had the grand opening just last fall, and this is our first chance to show it off to a large number of our members. So if you're a member and you're in the greater DC, Annapolis, Norfolk area, maybe even the New York, Pennsylvania area, if you want to come see the Jack C. Taylor Conference Center and participate in our annual meeting, it is always a terrific event. The $65 a year you spend on membership at the Naval Institute, you'll make it back in the open bar and the delicious food that we serve that night. And we're going to have a panel discussion with a couple of the American Sea Power Project authors. So I will just leave it at that. But trust me, you'll want to be here for this conversation and for the annual meeting and for the chance to have a tour of the Jack C. Taylor Conference Center. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. It is not a special military operation. It is a full-blown, illegal, cross-border operation, invasion of one country over another. We here at the Naval Institute are supportive of Ukraine, and we are making it known that we think that Vladimir Putin made an illegal decision to cross the border and invade a sovereign nation. Regardless of what he thinks about Ukraine, it is a sovereign nation that has the right to self-govern. And that operation, as you all know, is not going well for the Russians. I think their casualties have been higher than anyone expected. But of course, being on the receiving end of that punch, it's not going well for the Ukrainians either. So things are sort of bogged down as I read the press over the weekend. But it's a horrific event. And we're looking to get more and more content, both in USNI News and in Proceedings in the coming months on what's happening and the strategic and operational and tactical ramifications of events in Ukraine. So, stand by for more of that. Okay, I think I'll get to our guest now. So this is a preview. This is, I think, the first time we've done an article in an upcoming issue. So the first time usually we do the article, we publish the magazine, and then we bring the authors on board. But our guest this week is Major Zach Schwartz. He is the operations officer for a battalion out at 29 Palms, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. And as you can imagine, an active duty Marine, battalion operations officer for an active duty infantry battalion. He's got a lot going on, so he couldn't wait until his article hit the streets. But Major Zach Schwartz joining us from 29 Palms. Zach, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me, sir.
Okay, so your article is titled "Littoral Combat Teams Need Light Infantry, Not Less." And this is a response. I would note that it's an incredibly professional and well-argued response to the article that was the winning essay in the Marine Corps essay contest last fall by a Navy Lieutenant JG CB that was basically saying that the littoral combat teams, as the Marine Corps moves and develops these Marine littoral regiments and then the littoral combat teams, that they could actually have fewer infantry Marines and perhaps more of the specialties that do things like forward arming and refueling points, or the Nemesis battalion, not Nemesis units, I guess I should say, and didn't need quite as much infantry. And you're arguing, nah, not so fast. These littoral combat teams are going to need infantry. Infantry Marines is where it's at. So take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, sir. First and foremost, reading that article by Lieutenant Junior Grade Soo Kim, I enjoyed it, and it was definitely a good sign that people are putting the right thought and really mental preparation as we move forward, and the Marine Corps and the entire maritime team changes and heads into the future. That being said, as far as taking the LCT, which is has this battalion kind of construct to it, a full infantry battalion, and paring it down to just a company of infantry Marines, as Lieutenant JG Soo Kim is talking about, I think that exposes that formation to a lot of risk. And I think you can gain a lot of the advantages that he speaks about in there by grafting on the fires and FARP enablers that are incredibly important and are going to be increasingly vital as these constructs come online. You can gain those advantages by grafting those formations onto the battalion construct as it stands. But in removing the infantry, that footprint of the Marine riflemen, that there's going to be a lot of risk gained. Whereas we can mitigate a lot of that. We can mitigate a lot of that and increase our ability for these formations to not only conduct defensive operations more effectively, but also conduct the transition to the offense as well.
Got it. So we've heard from a number of Marines, including some of them on our editorial board, that there's a few different experiments happening now with the littoral combat teams in the Marine Corps, that they're trying a couple of different options and seeing what works. Correct? Is your battalion part of that experiment? Are you guys are you taking on one of those particular formations or concepts and going forward with it, or are you guys more a traditional infantry battalion that is waiting to see what happens out of those experimental teams?
Yeah, so at this point, we remain the infantry battalion as it's been for a while now. So we are not one of the experimental formations. That being said, there's a lot of folks in the battalion, and I can tell you across the Marine Corps, it sounds like you're already leaning into it and mentioning that people are really waiting to see how these experiments go. And it's an exciting time as the Marine Corps really embraces this iterative process to ensure that we're as lethal and capable as possible going into the future. So yeah, right now we're trying to learn as much as everybody else while still remaining ready with the legacy construct that we're utilizing.
Gotcha. So one of the things that we loved about your article when we read it and accepted it for publication was you had some great history examples, and one of them dates back to World War II and the battle between the Finnish army and Russian or Soviet naval infantry. So recap that for us. What were the lessons there that apply, in your mind, that apply to expeditionary advanced base operations, what the Marine Corps is trying to do in 2022?
Yeah, for sure. So the offensive that I was talking about was not specifically the Finns. It was the Germans occupying Finnish territory, specifically German formations of Gebersjäger, so mountain infantry that were sort of tasked with holding Finland above the Arctic Circle from the eventual assault of the Soviets. And the Soviets found themselves in a pretty tough situation. 1944, they've got a massive overmatch in armor and mechanized and motorized formations. You're not going to get away with a lot of that in the fjords of Finland, and very much the littoral zone that is this region that the Germans had fortified incredibly thoroughly. So the Soviets had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out how they were going to gain an advantage. And what they turned to was light infantry formations. So units of essentially riflemen they were reinforced with fires and TACP, so aviation enablers, and they moved light. They moved on their feet. They fought from ships. And what they really managed to do was outflank and outmaneuver these German defenders in multiple instances across the battlefront. And what's interesting is you really don't hear much about this offensive because it's not one of the massive campaigns that typically characterize what the Soviets saw as the Great Patriotic War, what we see as the Eastern Front. It was a light infantryman's war. Specifically light infantrymen in the littorals who enabled that advantage. And it was a good area to look for me as an infantryman who is preparing for combat in the littorals as the Marine Corps moves in that direction. It was a really good case study in how light infantry can really allow a decisive advantage in environments that are not too different than the rocky and difficult Pacific terrain that we're expecting to encounter on these islands across the Pacific.
Gotcha. Okay. And this is way up north. This is up, this isn't Gulf of Finland. This is up north, more closer to Murmansk in the very what in the summertime is really marshy. In the wintertime is awfully cold, correct?
Petsamo-Kirkenes was the name of the offensive. Yep. Pretty far north. But really, when you look at the terrain and you look at the challenges that terrain put on both forces, the Germans and the Soviets, there's some pretty strong parallels to where we're expecting to fight in the future, and some pretty strong lessons learned for how both formations were either successful or unsuccessful in the campaign above the Arctic Circle.
Gotcha. Okay. Talk a little bit about quantity and quality, because that comes up in your article as well. And you mentioned that Lieutenant J.G. Kim's article sort of said, hey, a littoral combat team should be a company of infantry, and then more heavily weighted towards the FARP or the Nemesis battery, if you will. And your argument is kind of the opposite, that it should be an infantry battalion, and then add to that infantry battalion the FARP capability or the anti-ship capability. So why? What are the major differences or advantages in having the infantry battalion be the center stage of that?
So for the infantry battalion and having that larger footprint, you gain a lot of flexibility, you gain a lot of depth when you talk about offensive and defensive operations. So I've been a company commander, and I can tell you that if I am the only infantry company in a formation built along the lines that Lieutenant Junior Grade Kim is talking about, span of control is going to start to become an issue. I mean, he's talking about sending individual squads out to conduct defensive operations, essentially independently on EABs. If I'm that company commander and I'm sending those squads out, our squad leaders are fantastic. They're great Marines and they lead great Marines. But I can tell you that squad's going to get pretty tired pretty quick, because as we learn from the Petsamo-Kirkenes offensive in the littorals, in this complex compartmentalized terrain, that squad, that company, that infantry formation is going to have to fight as light infantry to be successful. They're not going to have the heavy armor, the heavy firepower support that we've often relied upon in our history. They're going to have to fight on foot with really what they can carry. And that's a lot to ask of an independent squad that's conducting a defense all by their lonesome. A light infantry defense, it involves movement, it involves maneuver, it involves ambush, hidden blocking positions, moving every 24 hours. That squad's going to start to get pretty darn tired, and that platoon's going to start to get pretty darn tired. And when the only other forces you can rely upon for assistance are a couple other platoons within one company that's already very much overstretched and stressed out and attempting to conduct C2 across potentially hundreds of miles, I'm seeing some potential gaps coming in here. I'm seeing a lot of risk that if we had a full battalion construct, we could absolutely mitigate by having just more manpower on the deck, more infantry Marines who are capable of fighting that light infantry defense, of rotating through patrols, of rotating through seeking and conducting spoiling attacks against possible intruders or infiltrators. It's kind of it in a nutshell for the footprint, why that battalion is so critical to these formations.
Got it. So in your mind, so if we're talking about, potentially first island chain in the Philippines, perhaps, if a littoral combat team is an infantry battalion size, we're talking about perhaps more than just one atoll at a time, right? You're talking about several different fire teams out on multiple atolls with the ability to reinforce between them, and that's why you're arguing for a greater size, more of that light infantry, not less of it. I don't know if, and I guess when I read Lieutenant Kim's piece, it seemed like he was saying if you're going to have a FARP or a Nemesis battery, that particular battery only needs to have a company size element with it.
Yeah, and it seemed like for the LCT as he saw it, that one company is it. I mean, they're going to be spread across all of these various EABs or locations or wherever they're going to be set up, because part of their survivability is going to come from being dispersed and being able to move. And I think another piece of his argument is that we can refocus training on these non-infantry personnel to ensure that they are capable of conducting really infantry operations in the littorals so they can defend themselves. I can tell you, every Marine is a rifleman. All of our Marines are they're trained. They know how to shoot their rifle. They know how to engage targets, and they're pretty darn good. But I think when you only have that one company, you're putting a lot of stress on those non-infantry Marines to have to do infantry things. And here's the thing, the Marine Corps is invested in those Marines to be really good C2 enablers, or really good Nemesis operators, or really good bulk fuel logisticians. When they're getting pulled out of their day job, if you will, to bulk up patrols or help dig fighting positions or conduct some type of defensive offensive operations, you're degrading the capability of that LCT. Whereas if you just had the right infantrymen who are already invested in, the Marine Corps is already invested in them to be the best possible infantry Marines they can be. When they're doing their job and the non-infantry Marines are doing their specific jobs that they've been trained to, I think that's when the LCT is going to be most efficient. And you simply can't achieve that if you've just got that one company stretched to its limit across an LCT that's based on fires and FARP enablers, as opposed to having them as bolt-ons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it a lot of this is going to be dependent on the scale, right? And how, are we talking about hundreds of square miles with multiple, island EABs, and you're not really sure when you go in where the adversary is going to come after you. Are you taking an island from, perhaps the Chinese, or are you just going there, set up a Nemesis battery, set up a FARP, and trying to defend that so that the forces so that you can contest the sea control out around that island, or you can have F-35s or helicopters come and refuel forward, because the traditional amphibs, the L-class ships, have got to stay a little bit further back now because the adversary's got long-range weapons that can threaten them. So I guess to some extent, we're talking about, I keep thinking about Marine Air Ground Task Force, right? And you guys always, no matter what the Marine Corps mission is, you use that air ground capability, and you scale it for the mission. So it seems a bit of that we're kind of talking about. And in your idea, you've got more infantry Marines to be able to respond to all the different problem sets that the adversary might throw you, not just in one particular islet, but in perhaps multiple atolls, with the ability to move infantry around to meet the threat and defend the capability that you need to defend out there. Am I reading that right?
No, you absolutely are, sir. That LCT will just be more capable of defending itself, more capable of operating independently and staying lethal, and more capable of setting conditions for offensive and defensive operations. Another part, something that we don't think about, is a good defense oftentimes involves limited offensive action and kind of punching the other guy in the face before he gets the opportunity to get the jump on you. And when you just have a company that's all you have available as far as your infantry footprint, your light infantry capability, that's going to be tough. You look at you go back to the Battle of Cape Christovi with the Soviet Marines. They had one slightly reinforced company conducting an offensive operation against essentially a German EAB. They had fires assets that were denying access to a key port, and this company launches this assault, this raid, to prevent that battery from stopping an eventual Soviet amphibious assault. And they get pretty good effects initially. It's a night attack. They infiltrate. They get very close. They use very good light infantry tactics, camouflage, concealment. They get right up on top of the Germans before they know what's going on. But all they had was that company. And that enemy force, that German force, eventually reinforced, held them off just long enough to reinforce and make the situation pretty dicey for them, until the Soviet Marines were eventually reinforced with another company. They had their TAC-P get some aircraft on station and started running some close air support against those Germans. But it just goes to show you, we can do all these great light infantry things, but you really need enough of it to have the flexibility and depth that these formations are going to need to stay in the fight and stay survivable.
Gotcha. I'm going to go off your article for a minute and just ask you, a little bit of the water cooler conversation, or what's happening out there at 29 Palms is at your level as you talk to your colleagues. The Marine Corps Force Design 2030. There's been a lot of divestment of capabilities that had been, sort of legacy. Most notable is the tank battalions that have gone away, right? And we know that General Berger has consciously made the decision to make the Marine Corps a little bit smaller in order to get those new capabilities, train to those new capabilities, experiment with them to build towards, what will be Force Design 2030. As you guys, as you think about, potentially being battalion commanders or regimental commanders in your future, how do you see the future operations? How do you see, the light amphibious warship, the Nemesis system coming online, the use of UAVs in that sort of expeditionary environment out in the first or second island chain?
That's a great question.
It's a big one, I know.
Yeah, that's definitely. Tell you what, I don't know what your typical definition of water cooler conversation is. That takes it up a notch. I think you have a different water cooler than we do. But I'll tell you, if I had to sum it up, obviously we already mentioned it, but we're in this iterative process where we're experimenting. We're trying to figure these things out. We're trying to learn as best we can so we can tailor our approach and be as ready as possible. These new capabilities, all of these things that are coming online, I think, and I speak for myself here. I see these things as these are good tools. These are fantastic tools. These are incredibly vital tools to our new mission set. But the primary weapon system in the Marine Corps, personal opinion, is going to remain the Marine and the rifle. And I believe that needs to remain a bedrock of who we are. These Nemesis systems, these UAVs, these are tools that make us more effective, but there still needs to be a rifleman in there on the deck, patrolling, conducting offensive, defensive operations, because someone's going to come for that Nemesis system one day. Someone's going to come to that island. They might not show up in the big ship that we can easily target. They might show up in the middle of the night in a masked civilian vessel. They might come from undersea. They might get dropped off by proxies. We don't know. They might not even be from a country. They might just be some violent extremist organization. But they're coming. And I think it's fair to say that at some point, these formations that we're putting out there in the contact layer to preempt the adversary, these formations will be contested physically and violently at some point. And to protect all of these assets, protect all of these weapons, to make them work, we need the boots on the ground in the mud who are willing to protect it, and who have the skills and the light infantry mindset of I might get cut off, I might be trapped behind enemy lines, but I'm going to figure it out because that's what I do. I live in my environment. I hunt in my environment. The enemy is the intruder here. I'm going to find a way to win with just the clothes on my back, my chest rig, and my rifle. I think that's going to be the very much part of the decisive element when the enemy tries to take these cool toys and these incredible assets. When they try to take them away from us, there's going to be a Marine and their rifle standing between them and their goal.
That's a great answer. Is there excitement? I'm a mid-career officer, and I was one at one point, about the 10-year point. I'm a lieutenant commander, and I remember there were good days and bad days, right? But is there, as you guys think about this, you've moved out, you've done some rotations in the sandbox in Iraq or Afghanistan, and those were tough missions. But it was very much outside of the littoral world, right? And now the Marines are getting back to their naval roots. Navy SEALs are doing the same thing. We've got a lot in the upcoming April issue. We've got a great article also in the April issue about that says the Marines need a few good mules, which is talking about pack animals in expeditionary advanced base operations. If you're out there in small units in these places like the Philippines and other littoral areas around the South China Sea, it's going to be hard, to sustain those forces, right? So, guys are starting to think about, things like, hey, how did we do this in World War II? Well, we did it with pack animals, right? And that's for me, that was a fascinating article to read. I learned a lot about the history of pack animals, World War I, World War II, and hey, low signature, ability to forage for themselves, concealable perhaps, maybe more so than vehicles for certain. Anyway, interesting concepts, but a lot of these things are being thrown out in the pages of Proceedings, and I know that they're being experimented with, as you mentioned, in the Marine Corps. But I got to think that there's probably some at least intellectual excitement about this challenge right now.
There's definitely excitement. I can tell you that's a fact. This is a damn good time to be a Marine, to tell you straight up. It's a time of transition. It's a time where people are asking lots of questions, but that's the way it should be. And it's forcing us to engage intellectually with our profession, and to get beyond intellectual engagement. We can draw everything we want on a chalkboard. We can come up with as many cool ideas as we can, have dry erase markers to make them. But how do we make this something physical and tangible that we can experiment with? And how do we learn as much as possible from that experimentation? How do we debrief? How do we get a good after action out of it? And how do we turn it into something, again, tangible going forward? This is a great time to be a Marine. It's a challenging time for sure, but when has there ever been an easy time? This is the way we want it. We should be engaging, we should be debating, we should be coming to grips with tough ideas like how many infantry Marines do I really need to keep an LCT safe? How do I enable transition to the offense instead of just creating two surfaces in the Pacific? These are tough questions, but this is a time where folks are excited and they're engaging with the profession in a way that I don't think I've seen up to this point. Obviously, I'm just really a baby major right now, but it is a noticeable difference when I compare the conversations that are being had, even by lieutenants right now in my battalion, than the ones that I was having as a lieutenant, back in like 2012, when we weren't thinking about stuff like this. And it's encouraging and it's exciting to see.
Yeah, that's my sense as well. I was down at the basic school a couple weeks ago. Ward and I trade off, and we give a Naval Institute presentation at the basic school. And some of the questions I got from lieutenants after the brief, coming up and asking questions and wanting to write for proceedings. And, hey, sir, how do I do this? What are some topics? And I just sense that there's this an engaging spirit right now that, hey, we're facing a really tough adversary or adversaries, and a desire to want to think about things and experiment and war game and get out there and try new things. We have a question for one of our audience members. Alex Awesome Sauce writes, have there been any recent advancements in the body armor of the average infantry unit? So, you've been around for 10 years or so in the Marine Corps. How has body armor changed as for infantry Marines in that time?
Yeah, good question. I can tell you that it's we just got the new Gen 3 plate carriers at my battalion, and they're pretty good. We're continuing to move the ball forward. We've got high cut helmets now. We've got hearing protection, active hearing protection, Peltor headsets. We are definitely moving the ball forward as far as personal protective equipment for our Marines, and making sure that not only are they as safe as possible when we ask them to do very dangerous things, but they're as light and as lethal as possible. I think one of the big questions going forward, though, is when we go to places in the littorals, when we're climbing up seaside cliffs, when we're fighting through deep jungle, at what point are we willing to accept risk and drop that plate carrier entirely and fight with a chest rig? Or a belt with just our kit that we need to survive on it, and some magazines, and maybe some chow, and a shelter half. And that goes back to the exciting conversations we're having right now, because we're getting some cool stuff. We're getting some great tools, but in the end, the asset is still the Marine and their rifle. And sometimes fighting lighter is actually going to keep you more mission effective than wearing 18 layers of body armor. Again, personal opinion, but we're having the conversations and it's exciting. And even though we're getting the new cool stuff, we're asking some good deep questions about how we want to use that stuff, and how we can be most effective. That sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll read from your article, because Alex's question, this is something that you actually said in your article. You say foot mobile operations, and that gets to my point about mules, right? Foot mobile operations with only sporadic vehicle support must become the norm. Commanders must be encouraged to experiment with ways to make their Marines as light, lethal, and survivable as possible. This may mean accepting risk with shedding of body armor on patrols, or increase in the use of ultralight tactical vehicles and dirt bikes or mules for cross-country mobility. Anyway, lots to think about there. Alex, I'll give you the mic for a minute. What as kind of parting thoughts? what's on your mind as you get ready to deploy? You said your battalion's about to go out to Darwin, Australia. And as the conversation continues, as your article reaches the April proceedings, and then I'm sure we'll get letters on that, and we'll get more. That the conversation will continue to go. What would you like to see over the next year in terms of that experimentation and where the Marine Corps is, kind of finds itself in about this time in 2023 or 2024?
Yeah. So on the note of the mules, big fan of the animal packing courses that we have in that skill set. That's part of being light infantry. And the Soviet Marines were using reindeer above the Arctic Circle. So good historical precedent to that. I'm glad you pulled that one out, sir. But as far as the way ahead and what I'd like to see, if it comes down to one thing, I would have to say the experimentation and the willingness to test TTPs on the smallest tactical level. And what I mean by that is we should be getting ideas from our Lance Corporals and our PFCs. They're the ones who are going to go out and they're going to put on that chest rig or that plate carrier, and they're going to have to accomplish that mission with task and purpose. We should be pulling on our Lance Corporals, our most junior Marines, and getting their thoughts and really experimenting with what they think is going to make them more effective. We should be talking to our sergeants, our NCOs, the backbone of the Marine Corps, the ones who really make the rubber meet the road. Same thing. This experimentation, a lot of it's going to be coming down from higher levels. But that doesn't mean that we don't experiment on the lower levels as well. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come from the bottom up, because we might be getting some cool stuff. We might be getting Nemesis. We might be getting all kinds of great assets passed on to us, and that we fall in that gear set. But that doesn't mean that we can't experiment with TTPs and better ways to fight with it on our lower levels. So if we can see that experimentation from all Marines sustained, if we can see every Marine invited to the table for that conversation, I don't care if they're a PFC, I don't care if they're a Lance Corporal, Sergeant, all the way up to General. We need to be having these conversations as a team, and everybody needs to feel comfortable at the table, throwing their ideas out there, having somebody back them up and say, yeah, you know what, like, let's try that out. Let's see. Or maybe if it's not doable, they need to at least hear why. And they need to at least get pointed in the right direction, because that energy, that desire to change things, the desire to make things better, that isn't just a major or a captain thing. That's across the force. And what's going to keep us lethal and ready is capitalizing on it from every Marine, regardless of rank, and to include our Navy attachments as well, our corpsmen, our doctors, and even our ministry staff as well. So
those are some great points, and it would echo what we would tell you here, the readers and the listeners at Proceedings at the Naval Institute. We've made a concerted effort to get more enlisted authors in Proceedings over the last 5 or 6 years, very successfully. So if you look at the number of enlisted professionals writing in our pages, it has gone up steadily from 2015 on, partly because we brought back the enlisted prize essay contest. But now those enlisted professionals are realizing that they can also vie for competition or vie for prizes in our other essay contests, the Coast Guard essay contest, the Marine Corps essay contest, the General Prize essay contest, et cetera. So yeah, as you go out with your battalion, as you talk to the gunnies, as you talk to the staff sergeants and on down, those that have brilliant ideas, encourage them to write for us, because we'd love to publish them. We've got one last question from one of our listeners. S. Voigt writes, for the rifle squad, what sort of loadout for multi-missions such as anti-armor and anti-air? I know at the squad level this could be a tough challenge. Would you use specialized squads?
Yeah, that's a great question. Depending on their mission set. So what's great about the Marine Corps is I can go to that sergeant squad leader and I can say, hey, here's your task and purpose. Here's the mission I need you to do. And if he or she can't figure out how to accomplish that mission with the gear set that they have, they're going to ask for what they need. And our job on the battalion as the staff and on the company staff as well is to source those Marines with the tools they need to be successful. So really for anti-armor, I know folks probably know that the Carl Gustaf should be coming online in the near future. We've still got legacy anti-armor systems, Javelin, AT4, Small. Those are still fantastic systems, extremely effective. Those squads need to be capable of using those assets. And if they don't have the personnel to use them or the assets themselves, then my job as part of the staff is to source that for them. For the anti-air, it's a little bit trickier. Fortunately, the Marine Corps has been putting a lot of emphasis on our low altitude air defense Marines. And that might be one of those assets that we graft on to those squads and graft onto those companies, graft onto those LCTs. So maybe in the future, we've got squads patrolling with a Javelin system, but also a Stinger system or an LMATIS or some other low altitude air defense system. And having good light infantry squads that can get those assets in position to be effective, that's one of the things that makes the Marine Corps different. You give them the tools, you give them the enablers, those infantry Marines are going to get that asset where it needs to go to be most effective, and they're going to accomplish the mission.
I don't want to extrapolate too much from what's happening in Ukraine right now between the Ukrainian defenders and the Russian aggressors, but it would appear to me that there are some significant lessons for light infantry right now against a very heavy mechanized force that the Russians are using as an invasion force. And as you mentioned, Javelin, I know the Brits have given this thing an NLAW. But the light infantry on their feet running around with these anti-tank capabilities seems to be giving the Russians a really significant problem set. So that would at least validate to some extent the idea of light infantry, also the direction of lightness that Commandant Berger has taken in the Marine Corps.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, our time is up. Our guest today has been Major Zach Schwartz. He is joining us from 29 Palms out in California. He is the operations officer for 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Did I get that right? Or is it the opposite?
Got it. The blade.
I got it right. 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and he's the author of an article in the April issue. So previews of coming attraction coming in on our website on 31 March and to your mailbox, subject to the U.S. Postal Service delivery on or about the 1st of April. The article is titled Littoral Combat Teams Need Light Infantry, Not Less. And it's a great article. So, Zach, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for writing for Proceedings. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. Semper Fi.
All right. And for our listeners, the Naval Institute the Proceedings podcast is brought to you by the members of the Naval Institute. So if you are not a member, we'd encourage you to become one. Go to www.usni.org/join. There's digital membership, there's print and digital membership, there's 3-year memberships, life memberships. The most important thing is that you join and become a member of the Naval Institute, because everything we do is based on the strength of our membership. One today. And until next week, we'll catch you soon. Take care.